Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And our word for today on this Wednesday of the third week of Advent, this Wednesday, December the 20th, our word for today is Emmanuel. Emmanuel, our word for today. And here to talk about it, Deacon Dan Brahier. And Deacon Dan, I was trying to come up with Deacon Dan Brahier. Dan Brahier is your name, but what would you be referred to as? You know, like the Sultan of Swat was Babe Ruth. Jesus is Emmanuel. What would Dan be? Professor Fabuloso.
And don't say Dan the man.
Dan the man.
You know, I always tell people I taught junior high for so long I've been called everything.
Referred to as everything. There you go.
There is a little bit of identity confusion on the campus, though, because down in Bowling Green, because on one side of the street I teach, and the other side I preach. And so sometimes they refer. It's actually kind of funny because sometimes a student will see me on campus and say, "Hey, Dr. Brahier," and then we'll walk across the campus and they'll see me at St. Tom's and they'll say, "How you doing, Deacon Dan?" It's the same person 5 minutes later. You know? So somehow they can just like pull down that curtain and change the identity.
That's pretty good.
Pretty good, yeah.
Fun stuff. By the way, I don't think that eggs crack jokes; they crack yolks.
Ooh, very good. All right. I like it.
Yes, okay.
Cleaning up after us already.
That fits right
Well,
in.
we're doing what we can. Actually, so the word for the day is Emmanuel. I want to start with a little story, and it's maybe one that our listeners have heard before, and if so, it's a repeat, and if not, it's maybe a first time, but I think it fits here really well. The story goes kind of a parable. There was an abbot of a monastery, and he's having a conversation with a rabbi, and he was telling the rabbi about how his community, his monastic community, was dwindling, and their faith level was really low. And the rabbi says to him in this conversation, he says, "We have long known in the Jewish community that the Messiah is one of you." Mm-hmm. And so the rabbi kind of insisted, and the abbot pushed back. And then the conversation ended, and the abbot walked away thinking to himself, "There's no way the Messiah is one of us." And so he started to wonder, and he walked into the abbey church and he looked around at the other monks as they're praying, and he's starting to think to himself, "Who is it? Is it that guy? Is it that guy?" And as the days went on, he continued to just ponder this, to look around and trying to figure out who that might be. And as this time went on, the other monks noticed that he was treating them with a lot more love, with a lot more reverence, and a lot more respect. And as time went on, another one of the monks finally came up to him, and after a little bit of coaxing, he asked him, "What's going on here?" And the abbot told him what the rabbi had told him. And so the word spread among the monastic community, and suddenly the community itself was filled with life, with worship, with love, and with grace. And even the local villagers that lived just down the hill, they started to hear about it, and so they would come to visit the abbey to see what was going on there. And the monastery grew in size. In fact, they actually had a couple of sister monasteries that cropped up, and the monks continued to grow in wisdom. And what would happen is after they would take their vows, each of the monks was told the secret that was the source of their strength, the richness of their community, that one of them was the Messiah. Mm. And so even today, if you happen upon one of those monasteries filled with life and with hope and with kindness, we need to remember their secret, that the Messiah is among us. Mm. So I think that story kind of points to today's word of the day. You and I, as human beings, we yearn for the Messiah to be among us. And that's what the word Emmanuel means. Emmanuel means God is with us. And when we realize that the Messiah is with us, it is literally life-changing. And so people in that monastery, just like our world today, if we look around and we say, God is actually in my heart, and the Holy Spirit is here with us, that is going to, by default, change our actions. And so Matthew, in his gospel, makes a big point of that, much more than the other three evangelists. One of my favorite things about Matthew's gospel, in chapter 1, verse 23, the angel says to Joseph, by quoting Isaiah, the same reading, the first reading from today from Isaiah, he says, "Behold, the virgin will be with a child and will bear a son, and they shall call him Emmanuel," which means God is with us. So the angel is quoting Isaiah. At the end of Matthew's Gospel, chapter 28, verse 20, is the very last verse of the entire Gospel. We're at the Ascension, and the last verse of Matthew's Gospel is Jesus saying, "Behold, I am with you always." Mm-hmm. So the Gospel starts with the message, God is with us, and it ends with the message, I am with you always. Mm-hmm. So again, it's that same thing. The bookends of the Gospel are sending forth that message, that kind of rich message that we recognize that God is with us. And when we realize that, it is going to change our behavior, just like it did the monks in the story. And so the main message of Matthew's Gospel is to remind us that indeed the Messiah is with us. And so through his Holy Spirit, Jesus is always with us. He taps into our deepest longing to connect with him. And so I think as we get just a few days before Christmas, we recognize that Emmanuel, God, is indeed with us in the future, in the past, but also right here in the present.
Wow. You're a teacher and a preacher this morning.
Absolutely love it. And thank you so much, Deacon Dan, for the gift that you are to us and to our listeners. Can't wait for another year with you.
Well, thank you both for all of your ministry and what you do for our listeners, and we appreciate you very much. Merry Christmas.
All right, Lord bless you. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend, Deacon. And let's see, we'll be back tomorrow, God willing.
Yep. We've got a couple more days yet as we continue on with the Advent season. We look forward to being with you tomorrow. God bless you.
Thanks for listening.